Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, I shouldn't say ladies and gentlemen, like most of the time I talk to the void. And that's what maybe life is about, dealing with the void, because we are nothing but worms. So actually, I want to talk about Charles Darwin, this gentleman here in the middle of this caricature. And this is actually a parody about how Darwin's imagined life has evolved. And many people, they say, well, do you really defend this theory that we come from worms? Worms develop into fish-like, snake-like creatures, crawl to land, then the I don't know how you call it, but the tail of the worm becomes the tail of an ape, and then slowly the ape develops into like a kind of thinking and ridiculous being to a stone age caveman, while it finally ends up with Darwin meditating about their becoming. So this is where like Darwin is situated in the macro evolutionary context. It's a parody here. And I wonder who's Darwin for real. And last time we read the Wikipedia entry, and now we just like go on with the Britannica because they also have interesting things to say. Yeah, okay, he was born 1809, yeah, 2 years after the Phenomenology of Spirit, and died 1882, 1 year before Kafka was born. Yeah, other things don't come to my mind here. And he was an English naturalist who was interested in the scientific theory of evolution. I just wonder, what do they write about scientific theory? It's the systematic ideational structure of broad scope conceived by the human imagination that encompasses a family of empirical laws regarding regularities existing in objects and events, both observed and posited. Yeah, they are very careful here. It's definitely also an interesting article to read sometime, although it seems rather small. But let's stay with Darwin. Just press the back button. Okay, there we go. So, okay, an affable country gentleman, he's a gentleman. Darwin at first shocked religious Victorian society by suggesting that animals and humans shared a common ancestry. However, his non-religious biology appealed to the rising class of professional scientists, and by the time of his death, evolutionary imagery had spread through all of science literature and politics. Yeah, this is what I don't know, because in the Wikipedia article they said that he just became acknowledged in the 50s of the last century, of the 20th century. So Darwin himself, an agnostic, was accorded to the ultimate British accolade of burial in Westminster Abbey. So, okay, again, I don't say that it was only accepted in the 50s. I think in like with the upcoming of the modern synthesis hypothesis, it was finally acknowledged, but before it was mostly, I guess, debated. So what is an accolade? It's a mark of acknowledgement, an acknowledgement of praise. Okay. So Darwin formulated this boat theory in private, 1837 to 39, after returning from a voyage around the world aboard HMS Beagle, but it was not until 2 decades later that he finally gave it full public expression in On the Origin of Species, 1859. 1859. Wasn't that the year when Husserl was born? I believe so. And Arthur Conan Doyle, maybe. Correct me if I'm wrong. So we look here a little bit at the map. Charles Darwin. Oh, why do they have so many pictures here? That's nice. But let's not look at it now. I guess they have more. Oh, I can just go through them. Oh, it's all pictures from the website. Okay. So yeah, we see here, I guess it started in Plymouth, and then it had some stops in Africa, and I guess it took the shorter route over through the Atlantic and went through South America, various stations, stopped at the Galapagos, and then it made a long journey through the Pacific Ocean, Australia. Man, this guy saved the world. I wonder how difficult that was at that time. How difficult was it to be on such a ship? I don't know. Oh, I lost the article. Okay, let's keep on going. So early life and education. Darwin was the second son of Society Dr. Robert Warren Darwin and Susanna Wedgwood, daughter of the Unitarian pottery industrialist Joshua Wedgwood. He seems to be important. Joshua Wedgwood. I like that on Wikipedia they always immediately open this page. Unitarianism is a liberal religious movement that have emerged in the United States. In previous centuries, they appealed for their views, scriptures interpreted by reason. Okay, so I guess they want to have like a kind of Thomas Aquinas reading of the Bible. Just a guess. So Darwin's other grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, a free-thinking physician and poet fashionable for the French Revolution, was author of Zoonomia, or The Laws of Organic Life. Sounds like a good movie title. Darwin's mother died when he was 8. That's hard. And he was cared for by his 3 elder sisters. I don't know if that is any better. The boy stood in his awe of his overbearing father, whose astute medical observations taught him much about human psychology. But he hated the rote learning of classics at the traditional Anglican Shrewsbury School, where he studied between 1818 and 1825. Science was then considered dehumanizing in English public schools and dabbling in chemistry. Darwin was condemned by his headmaster and nicknamed Gas by his schoolmates. So, okay, science was considered dehumanizing in English public schools. I guess that's why the central hub for science became Edinburgh, right? His father considered the 16-year-old a wastrel interested only in game shooting, sent him to study medicine at Edinburgh University in 1825. Later in life, Darwin gave the impression that he had learned little during his 2 years at Edinburgh. In fact, it was a formative experience. There was no better science education in a British university. And that's exactly what I said. He was taught to understand the chemistry of cooling rocks on the primitive Earth and how to classify plants by the modern natural system. At the Edinburgh Museum, he was taught to stuff birds by John Edmonston, a freed South American slave. Oh, that's okay. That's interesting. So that's really interesting. Why don't they have an article on John Edmonston? And to identify the rock strata in colonial flora and fauna. I saw some comments of Darwin complaining about the slavery that he had seen on his journey. Maybe that was going back to this experience of having a teacher who was a former slave. I want to check something on the University of Edinburgh. I wish they would say like a little bit about their history. The university initially consisted of a liberal arts college and a school of divinity. Schools of medicine and law were established in the early 18th century, and faculty of music, science, arts, social sciences, and veterinarian medicine were subsequently added. Okay. Although its faculty of divinity has always been singular importance to the university, its school of medicine is also renowned. The English naturalist Charles Darwin studied medicine there. The University of Edinburgh has produced a long line of eminent cultural figures, including the novelist Sir Walter Scott, the philosopher and historian James Mill, the essayist and historian Tom Carlyle, the novelist Robert Louis Stevenson, and the inventor Alexander Graham Bell. Like, I wonder, I mean, they probably didn't produce them, but Edinburgh had also Hume, right? And Adam Smith. Am I wrong on that? Adam Smith and Edinburgh? Let's just check that. Let's see. Come on, give me a little bit more information on the first side. Yeah, here. He gave public lectures at the University of Edinburgh. How can you not mention Adam Smith in this article? I think Hume was a librarian there. Well, just have knowledge today. So, okay, let's go on. So more crucially, the university's radical students exposed the teenager to the latest continental sciences. Edinburgh attracted English dissenters who were barred from graduating at the Anglican University of Oxford and Cambridge, and at student societies, Darwin heard freethinkers deny the divine design of human facial anatomy and argue that animals shared all the human mental faculties. Okay. One talk on the mind as the product of the material brain was officially censored for such materialism, was considered subversive in the conservative decades after the French Revolution. Now I really wonder, like materialism became really strong in the 1850s in Germany. I think this year is, however, much earlier. And the idea was that all the psychological phenomena can be at some point explained by the material that they are based upon. And so it's interesting for me to hear that materialism had already influence on the young Charles Darwin. Darwin was witnessing the social penalties of holding deviant views. As he collected sea slugs and sea pens on nearby shores, he was accompanied by Robert Edmund Grant, a radical evolutionist and disciple of the French biologist Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. Okay, so this is the guy who says, okay, a giraffe wants to grow, and therefore giraffes became bigger. An expert on sponges, Grant became Darwin's mentor, teaching him about the growth and relationship of primitive marine invertebrates, which Grant believed held the key to unlocking the mysteries surrounding the origin of more complex creatures. Darwin encouraged to tackle the larger questions of life through a study of invertebrate zoology. Zoology? Made his own observations on the larval sea mat, Flustra, and announced his findings at the student societies. The young Darwin learned much in Edinburgh's rich intellectual environment, but not medicine. Yeah, so what I read, Edinburgh had these circles, these private reading circles as a result of the Enlightenment. I don't know if that was still in the 19th century, but it was a kind of private education. And I think if it's not only institutional, but also private, then education can become really big. So the young Darwin learned much in Edinburgh's, which, okay, we had that, right? His free-thinking father, shrewdly realizing that the church was a better calling for an aimless naturalist, switched him to Christ's College, for Christ's sake, Cambridge, in 1828. In a complete change of environment, Darwin was now educated as an Anglican gentleman. He took his horse, indulged his drinking, shooting, and beetle collecting passions with other squires' sons, and managed 10th place in the Bachelor of Art degree in 1831. 10th place. Actually, I don't think so many people studied in Cambridge, but maybe I'm wrong on that. I wonder if it's a sign of honor to be at the 10th place. Only the gold medal matters. Okay. Here he was shown the conservative side here he was shown the conservative side of botany by a young professor, the Reverend John Stevens Henslow, while that doyen of providential design in the animal world, the Reverend Adam Sedgwick, took Darwin to Wales in 1831 on a geologic field trip. Fired by Alexander Humboldt's account of the South American jungles in his personal narrative of travels, Darwin jumped at Henslow's suggestion of a voyage to Tierra del Fuego at the southern tip of South America aboard a rebuilt brig, MHS Beagle. What is a brig? A brig is a two-masted sailing ship with square rigging on both masts. Okay, so in case you're interested, this is a brig. Okay, let's go on. Darwin would not sail as a lowly surgeon naturalist, but as a self-financed gentleman companion to the 26-year-old Captain Robert Fitzroy, an aristocrat who feared the loneliness of command. Fitzroy's was to be an imperial evangelic voyage. Okay, I'm sorry. So he planned to survey coastal Patagonia to facilitate British trade and return 3 savages previously brought to England from Tierra del Fuego and Christianized. Darwin equipped himself with weapons books. So, first of all, they returned 3 savages. That's just got Christianized. That's such a weird trip already. So, and then, of course, Darwin gets some weapons and books. Weapons and books, that's what you need. And yeah, Fitzroy gave him the first volume of Principles of Geology by Charles Lyell. I think he's also from Edinburgh, right? And advice on preserving carcasses from London's zoos experts. The Beagle sailed from England on December 1831. So here's a more detailed map. We don't look into that. The Beagle voyage of Charles Darwin. The circumnavigation of the globe would be the making of the 22-year-old Darwin. 5 years of physical hardship and mental rigor imprisoned within a ship's walls, offset by wide open opportunities in the Brazilian jungles and the Andes Mountains, were to give Darwin a new seriousness. As a gentleman naturalist, he could leave the ship for extended periods pursuing his own interests. As a result, he spent only 18 months on the voyage aboard the ship. Okay, like, I don't really understand that here. 5 years of physical hardship and mental rigor imprisoned within ship's walls, but then he spent only 18 months there. So how difficult was it? I think it was difficult, but like, be more precise. The hardship was immediate, a tormenting seasickness. And so was his questioning. On calm days, Darwin's plankton-filled town had left him wondering why beautiful creatures teemed in the ocean's vastness, where no human could appreciate them. On the Cape Verde Island, oh, that's a good question, right? Like, why does God create beautiful creatures if the human being is the center of the creation? On the Cape Verde Islands, the sailors saw bands of oyster shells running through local rocks, suggesting that Lyell was right in his geologic speculations, and that the land was rising in places, falling in others. At Salvador de Bahia, now Salvador, Brazil, the luxuriance of the rainforest left Darwin's mind in chaos of delight. But that mind, with its Wedgwood abolitionist characteristics, was revolted by the local slavery. For Darwin, so often alone, the tropical forest seemed to compensate for human evils. Months were spent in Rio de Janeiro amid that shimmering tropical splendor full of gaily colored flatworms, and the collector himself became red hot with spiders. But nature had its own evils, and Darwin always remembered with a shudder the parasitic ichneumon wasp, which stored caterpillars to be eaten alive by its grubs. He would later consider that evidence against the beneficent design of nature. And I mean, yeah, that's always what I wonder. People romanticize and idealize nature, but it's a brutal struggle for existence that we as humans somehow escaped and replaced it with a struggle for identity. On the River Plate in July 1832, he found Montevideo, Uruguay, in a state of rebellion and joined armed sailors to retake the rebel-held fort. At Bahia Blanca, Argentina, gauchos told him of their extermination of Pampas Indians. Beneath the veneer of human civility, genocide seemed the rule on the frontier, a conclusion reinforced by Darwin's meeting with General Juan Manuel de Rosas and his villainous banditti-like army, in charge of eradicating the natives. For a sensitive young man fresh from Christ's College, that was disturbing. His contact with untamed humans on Tierra del Fuego in December 1832 unsettled him more. How great, wrote Darwin, the difference between savage and civilized man is. It is greater than between a wild and domesticated animal. God had evidently created humans in a vast cultural range, and yet, judging by the Christianized savages aboard, even the lowest races were capable of improvement. Darwin was tantalized, and always he niggled for explanations. That's actually, yeah, an interesting account how they write that, right? Definitely better written than the Wikipedia. His fossil discoveries raised more questions. Darwin's periodic trips over 2 years to the cliffs at Bahia Blanca and farther south at Port St. Julian yielded huge bones of extinct mammals. Darwin manhandled skulls, femurs, and armor plates back to the ship. Relics he assumed of rhinoceroses, mastodons, cow-sized armadillos, and giant ground sloths, such as Megatherium. What the hell? What is going on here? A giant like sloth? That's the largest sloths and extinct group of mammals belonging to a group containing sloths. Like just imagine such a big sloth, a Megatherium. Okay. So he unearthed a horse-sized mammal with a long face like an anteater's, and he returned from a 340-mile, 550 kilometers ride to Mercedes near the Uruguay River with a skull 28 inches long strapped to his horse. Fossil extraction became a romance for Darwin. Man, that's good writing. It pushed him into thinking of the primeval world and what had caused those giant beasts to die out. Okay, this is really an adventure novel, right? Darwin's life, man. He was on an adventure. The land was evidently changing. Rising Darwin's observations in the Andes Mountains confirmed it. After the Beagle surveyed the Falkland Islands, and after Darwin had packed away at Port Desire, Argentina, the partially ignored bones of a new species of small rhea, the ship sailed up the west coast of South America to Valparaiso, Chile. Here, Darwin climbed 4,000 feet, 1,200 meters into the Andean foothills. Well, come on, that's not that much. And marveled at the forces that could raise such mountains. The forces themselves became tangible when he saw volcanic Mount Osorno erupt on January 15, 1835. Then in Valdivia, Chile, on February 20th, as he lay on a forest floor, the ground shook. The violence of the earthquake and the ensuing tidal wave was enough to destroy the great city of Concepcion, whose rubble Darwin walked through. But what intrigued him was the seemingly insignificant, the local mussel bats, all dead. What is mussel? Mussel? The local mussel mollusk. Okay, it seems to be a sea creature, right? Oh, I think what it is. I wish they had a better picture. Does it say it? Belonging to the maritime family Mytilidae and to the freshwater family Unionidae. Well, that helps a lot. Thank you very much. Worldwide in distribution, they're most common in cool seas. Mussels. Okay, I think I know what that is. I guess in German we say Muscheln. I'm not sure. Okay, the land had risen. Lyell, taking the uniformitarian position, had argued that geologic formations were the result of steady cumulative forces of the sort we see today. And Darwin had seen them. The continent was thrusting itself up a few feet at a time. He imagined the eons it had taken to raise the fossilized trees and sandstones to 7,000 feet, 2,100 meters where he found them. So he walked actually higher. Darwin began thinking in terms of deep time. Man, that's good writing here, I must say, like whoever wrote that. Unfortunately, I have to go. But yeah, I will go through that on. It's well written. And that will serve as an example for how I write my book chapter on Darwin. So if you want to see the next part, join me then and we read it together. Do you have any comments? Then live long, comment, and prosper.